The Coast Guard's role in fostering cooperation in South China Sea.
In the meantime, I would also like to thank our participants online for sending us a lot of questions. Please keep them coming. And don't forget that you could ask questions or raise questions in our Q&A chat box on Zoom, or you can drop a comment on our live stream feeds available on our YouTube or Facebook page, South China Sea Studies. And don't forget to include your name and affiliations upon raising questions. Ambassador, are you ready?
Shall we start?
Okay.
Sorry, not met properly. Yeah. Are you going to be moderator? Yes, I will be your moderator. Can you give me your card? Sure. Just give me a second.
For our on-site delegate, don't forget to scan the QR code available at any registration table for the delegates package, including the report from last year's conference, as well as the post-conference survey for this year.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Well, Excellencies, Ambassadors, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen,
Okay, that's fine.
it is time to start. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. It is time to start the second sessions of the 16th South China Sea Conference hosted by the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. This session is titled ASEAN Centrality at a Difficult Time, Staying Strong or Lying Low, and it will be moderated by His Excellencies Mr. Jaya Ratnam, the Singaporean Ambassador to Vietnam. Please, Mr. Excellencies Ratnam.
You can ask from the floor. Hello. Dear friends, hello. Dear friends, a very good afternoon. Welcome back from lunch. Thank you to the DAV for inviting me to moderate this session. We restart our discussions today with ASEAN, specifically its centrality in the region that is going in a difficult time and that in a time when ASEAN is being tested. We have a very, very distinguished panel here joining us today to guide us through whether ASEAN should stay strong, lie low, or maybe our choices are not that binary, maybe a bit of both. We have on our panel, starting with His Excellency Ambassador Sisuvong, the former Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN, Professor Jitipat, the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Political Science, Thammasat University from Thailand, Dr. Hu Chiu Peng, Senior Fellow, East Asian International Relations Caucus from Malaysia, and last but certainly not least, Professor De Castro, Distinguished Professor, Department of International Studies, De La Salle University from Philippines, of course. We have about 1 hour and 20 minutes. I intend to get straight into the discussions. Each speaker will have about just 10-12 minutes to outline your thoughts. I hope to have a good discussion after that with all of you. I look forward to a more online participation, and I especially look forward to hearing from the young leaders, as this is your future we are talking about. So please ask a lot of questions to all our friends from ASEAN here. So can I start our discussions first with Professor De Castro? You have the floor, sir.
Before I start, let me express my utmost appreciation to the organizers for bringing me back to this conference. I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'll just breeze through my PowerPoint presentation. So my topic for today is focusing on PowerPoint. It's not coming out. Arrangement for my PowerPoint. Okay, my PowerPoint is not yet coming out. Okay, so let me just, my topic for today, of course, is ASEAN at this point in time. Of course, the reality of ASEAN right now, is the fact that the Indo-Pacific region is undergoing a dramatic strategic change. It's not working. Oh. So the fact that we have an intensifying strategic competition, China and the United States over the nature of the regional order. Of course, the idea of a strategic competition is basically a reaction of the United States, given the fact, of course, that the United States has always been the strategic offshore balancer since, of course, 1945. So the perception, of course, is based on the fact that, of course, in the last few decades, China has basically injected a huge amount of money to build up right now, of course, the largest navy in the world and massive military buildup. China's current modernization, of course, includes the development of advanced surface competence and, of course, ability of the People's Liberation Army's Navy to challenge head-on the United States forces that are deployed here in the region. Of course, Chinese maritime activities, creation of bases. And of course, the strategic competition began with the Trump administration, basically saying, we have to prepare, basically, for what China might be doing. US military developed contingency plan, just in case you have ongoing. And of course, the Biden administration simply continued the strategic competition. So if you think about what might happen after this election next year, please take note that the strategic competition began with the Trump administration. Then, of course, the narrative is China's growth, development. I have to breeze through this. And, of course, this basically put Southeast Asia right in the smack of the strategic competition. So I will basically focus on two cases wherein, of course, ASEAN is put on the spot. Number one, of course, is ASEAN's ability to come out with a common strategy. And the second case involves my country. How my country's action in the face of China's maritime expansion is, of course, putting ASEAN on the spot. So I don't have enough time. Let me just breeze through this, of course. The 10 member states of ASEAN nations are, of course, confronted by their most serious challenge ever. Of course, the association was formed in 1967. The fact that you have, of course, the term, whether elephants make love or war, it's the grass that gets crushed. And that's the case of ASEAN right now. So, of course, that's my address and how. So, let's look at ASEAN amidst the US-China strategic competition. ASEAN, of course, is an association of small and middle powers with limited military capabilities. ASEAN has no significant institution agreements. We simply rely on moral suasion and, of course, diplomatic efforts. Historically, of course, despite its limitation and weakness, ASEAN has performed an important role of limiting the ability of great powers to influence Southeast Asia. So that means, of course, maintaining neutrality, impartiality, and of course, autonomy demonstrated by efforts to limit external interference in regional affairs. ASEAN member states play this game, what we call the equibalancing game. It's the interest of Southeast Asia to ensure that great powers are here so they could balance each other. And of course, in the face of the US-China strategic competition, this is more easier said than done because we have to rely on the role of the United States as strategic offshore balancer. At the same time, China has basically penetrated all the economies in the region. So, of course, in the mid-2019, ASEAN tried to address this challenge by coming out, of course, with the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific. I'll just breeze through the history of the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific. Of course, this was formulated primarily. Indonesia was the brain behind the idea of an ASEAN-centered Indo-Pacific strategy as a reaction to the United States Indo-Pacific strategy. Jakarta was suspicious of the formation of the Quad as a strategic coalition that, of course, undermined ASEAN's role. In a way, it reflects ASEAN principles, which we can discuss later. emphasized the ASEAN way of avoiding legalistic institutionalism. Unfortunately, of course, ASEAN adopted it as an outlook, not as a common strategy. Of course, and this has something to do with the fact that, again, when it comes to ASEAN, what is important is the national interests of 10 member states. ASEAN is primarily an intergovernmental association. It had no supranational entity, which of course created this frustration. Now let me focus on the challenge posed by our decision to confront China head-on in the South China Sea. ASEAN, through IOP, of course, is pursuing a policy of selective adoption, wherein ASEAN can get the most. If you go to a buffet table, you have the choices provided to you by China and, of course, the United States. Through its policy of selective adoption, ASEAN takes upon itself the act of the intermediary or honest broker, that we could play this, I would call the fence-sitting role. But of course, this has been undermined by my country's position. President Marcos came out with a very strong statement last year while he was in Indonesia. He came out again with a very strong statement during the ASEAN-China Summit in Laos, where he said, you cannot simply ignore what's happening in the South China Sea. Of course, at the onset, President Marcos wanted basically a balanced strategy, but of course, this was complicated by Chinese expansion. And of course, we had simply no choice but to adopt a balancing policy characterized by efforts to build up the armed force of the Philippines, and of course, boost our alliance with the United States. And of course, recently, of course, we have decided to adopt a grand strategy. The first time that the Philippines, since it became an independent state in 1946, adopted a grand strategy. I will not discuss the detail, but the details, of course, building up our maritime capabilities. So I'll just focus on what are the implications of this. Okay, so implication, no need to discuss. Go. In the face of China's emergence as a great power in the Indo-Pacific, the 9 ASEAN member states have adopted forms of diplomatic strategies such as hedging, limited balance alignment, binding institutional balancing, and socialization, aimed primarily to manage the tension. But of course, most ASEAN countries have relied on diplomatic strategies. But of course, in the case of my country, we have adopted a grand strategy. And once you adopt a grand strategy, you think in terms of building up your military capability, specifically the naval capability, that of course, look at the possibility of a conflict, not only in the South China Sea, but more significantly, north of the Philippines, and I'm talking about Taiwan. So we are caught in the middle of 2 major flashpoints, which would drag us into a major conflict, either Taiwan or South China Sea. Of course, in the case of Taiwan, we could not be neutral with Taiwan because of geography, and we have a treaty alliance with the United States. So among the ASEAN countries, the Philippines is the only one country considering China's maritime expansion as the quintessential threat to our national security. Second, the Philippines' implementation of a grand strategy set it apart from the other ASEAN countries that, of course, pursuing diplomatic strategies, while, of course, we're thinking in terms of building up our armed forces, strengthening our alliance, building up our defense industry that could enable us to have control of our maritime domain in our exclusive economic zone. And more significantly, of course, we have strengthened our relationship with Washington, Canberra, Tokyo, and even Seoul. So that's why you have the notion now of the Squad. So in a way, people are saying, some of our ASEAN colleagues are saying, where's the Philippines? Is it still part of Southeast Asia? So again, I'm going to my conclusion. So what are we saying? It's, of course, ASEAN has addressed the quintessential security challenge through, of course, informal diplomacy, decentralized structure, consensus decision, reliance, of course, on diplomatic strategy of pitting one great power against the other. Amidst the US-China strategic competition, ASEAN tried to forge a common strategy, and of course, one that could come out with a common selective one, the ASEAN Outlook. Let's look at the world as a buffet where you can pick one and choose another one. But of course, the world is more complicated than ever. Okay, let's just go into my conclusion. Of course, this development showed that Southeast Asian countries collectively within ASEAN cannot definitely manage a systematic challenge. wherein, of course, you have one major power trying to undermine the system and the other trying to protect it. The best that ASEAN could do is influence major powers in a way that they might advance their interests and manage any changes. But of course, this is easier said than done, simply because ASEAN would have to rely on great power support or cooperation, simply because ASEAN relies on moral suasion, not on the military capability. Of course, what I'm basically saying is the fact that ASEAN is right now faced by its greatest security challenge, the fact that it's caught in the middle of great power competition. I'll stop my presentation here. Cooperation demands, accept, but of course, the possibility of a peaceful change is something that's desired, but whether we could achieve it or not in the South China Sea or Taiwan is a matter. I end my presentation here. And just a quotation from a former Indonesian minister about ASEAN being caught as a conductor in an orchestra. But once the orchestra goes wrong, ASEAN will have to suffer the consequences of this. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm sorry I took some minutes of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor De Castro, for giving your perspective of the reality of the world ASEAN is situated in, and also your perspective of the ASEAN way. Maybe now we turn to Dr. Hu Chiu Peng to give the Malaysian perspective. Dr. Hu, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Jaya. So first of all, I want to thank DAV for inviting me to be part of the conversation this year. And my respect to Ibu Dewi, who gave such great remarks during the previous session. I'm sure everyone in the room would agree with me. So since I couldn't put the idea any better than Ibu Dewi did, so I'm now trying to come up with some of the my own talking points. So I think ASEAN centrality in the South China Sea, in the way this theme is designed to ask about the question, are we going to stay strong or lying low? So what's the reason for us to behave in the way that we need to be assertive or to preserve our agency and autonomy? Or the choices of laying law, is it exclusive only to the non-claimant states? Or are we going to, not to mention some other countries who are claimant state but remain very quiet. So this involves a lot of dilemma because we need to ask the question whether prioritizing South China Sea dispute is in our national interest. So when we try to profile, to map each of our interests, matching with our capabilities, then surely every countries are on their own when it comes to ensure our national survival. So sometimes we cannot force upon a singular concept or framework and that everyone is expected to abide by that. So then what does that make ASEAN centrality? So are we supposed to abandon it together, or is it still important to hold us as a single regional organization? Should even non-claimant states should be on board of this? So I wanted to put out these difficult questions so that we can ponder upon it. So the late Michael Leifer, a very respectful late Southeast Asianist, even back in 1987, he already see that ASEAN is actually a conservative regional organization and not meant for innovation. And yet nowadays, because the stake has become so high, the strategic uncertainties has go beyond at any moment in the history of ASEAN formation. We need to grasp about not only in the South China Sea, but as I listened to Professor Renato's presentation, you mentioned about Taiwan. So Taiwan Strait has becoming increasingly a point in which we need to think about whether extra-regional or to Philippines is not extra-regional, it's just on top of your national geographical location. And there is a lot of reason for us to think about how what does this mean to how we manage our relationship with China, the United States, and many other regional stakeholders in ASEAN. So South China Sea dispute is also often being quoted as the main case that ASEAN unity, ASEAN way, ASEAN centrality is not going to work. So I have gone through several master and doctoral dissertation written by Southeast Asian and non-Southeast Asian. And I see that various arguments have been put forward in the way that some think upholding ASEAN centrality is important because a divided ASEAN is even more worrisome for the future of the region. And some things that we should actually proceed to pursue what we think is right, and that is the unilateral or bilateral approaches, or even forging deeper collaboration with the United States or some other countries who pledge not to choose side, fiercely independent, and that provided a kind of a very complex, multi-layered national approaches within the multilateral framework. So the success of ASEAN is that we actually provided the foundation for East Asian regional security architecture. So what does it mean is that we often forget about how important is platform like ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, and that ADMM has become ADMM Plus. And even though the framework is actually non-binding, but you find the most inclusive engagement and participation, not only from all ASEAN member states, but also from our dialogue partners. And that also means that we need to look beyond whether the finalized COC would be non-binding or legally binding. It doesn't matter as long as it can help us to proceed to practical cooperation. The previous two sessions has touched upon various aspects of COC. So I really like how one of our keynote speaker, Bucks Hato, actually also mentioned that COC must be aligned with UNCLOS. Despite our different interpretation of UNCLOS, rules-based order is something that we appreciate because it ensures a certain level of regional stability. So also, because it took such a long time to reach where we are, when you establish the timeline of how we first mooted the idea, let's have a declaration of the code of conduct, and then let's try to reach the final draft, and now we have a single draft negotiation text. All of these timelines are disrupted by various types of incidents. So it began with the oil rig crisis in recent years between Vietnam and China, and then the Chinese fleet, along with the Coast Guard vessel, constantly appearing in Vietnamese and also Malaysian waters, and now also affecting Bruneians water. So all of this means that we need to find innovative way. We cannot just stay the same. Without new thinking, there is no way that we can break through with achieving a kind of a breakthrough in the current stalemate. The previous session that is supposed to address how are we going to deal with the multipolarity, the hot peace or Cold War. I think in Southeast Asia, economic security is so important. You would see so Malaysia is often being accused as appeasing to China. But what we did is actually quiet backdoor diplomacy. We do express our discontent to our Chinese counterpart. There is rules of engagement unspoken, but respected and observed during the encounters of our respective enforcement agency at sea. So I think these are the things, every country have reason why they need to pursue transparency initiative. It's not necessarily mean that it is not right, not the right way or whatsoever. Our country, our government just choose what is considered to be the best approach to preserve our national interest. And for Malaysia, oil and gas excavation, exploration activity is utmost important. Petronas contributed to about 25% of our GDP, and this is the point that we will never give up when it comes to our South China Sea so-called dispute management. So ASEAN centrality to a certain extent for the good past 20 or so years has managed to preserve a kind of strategic restraint upon the major powers. So we actually try to persuade the United States, China, and many other regional stakeholders not to clash in our region, because these waterways is so important for international trade, maritime shipping, and we are yet to be able to face or even start to talk about the new security challenges that is facing us, such as the nuclearization of the maritime domain, and our Navy and Coast Guards are under-equipped in facing cyber attacks on maritime infrastructure. We are yet to be able to get there, and we get stuck with the geopolitical problem. We barely move forward beyond the talk of the contentions that has the historical dispute and ground on it. So likewise, we need to impose a kind of responsibility framework, because if we keep talking about norm building also come with, like the previous speakers have mentioned, with strategic restraint to be imposed among ourselves, and also to I don't know why this fruit fly keep disturbing me. So I think despite the disruption, disturbance, what have you, I think we need to be very clear about what is our end goal. And increasingly, South China Sea is facing the challenges of shifting goalposts. So we are supposed to kick the football into this goalpost, but then the goal has been shifted again and again and again. So I'm not sure, because from my research interview, I found that some Chinese scholars do open up to the idea for a legally binding COC, for example. And it is now the ASEAN member state that doesn't want the COC to be legally binding if it is successfully negotiated. So this means we need to open up more dialogues among our the relevant stakeholders, and to promote more new ideas on how we can take this forward. So with that, I would like to listen to the rest of the speakers from then onward. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hu Juping, for outlining your Malaysia's perspective on how to preserve agency, especially given the difficulties and dilemmas we all face. Now I give the floor to Professor Jitipat to give the Thai perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank DAV, our kind and generous host, for the invitation. Luckily, I follow these two great speakers, so they have already laid out many fundamentals, so I will go into specific details. So I think the questions that DAV posed to this forum is very important, that whether ASEAN centrality is staying strong or lying low, I think is crucial. But sometimes if we dig into detail, this binary opposition might be varied due to, one, ASEAN might deal with different issues and topics differently. Some topics that ASEAN might play active roles, so they're staying strong together collectively. But sometimes when national interests diverge, they might be confronting each other, or cannot reach a consensus. Or on some area that some countries are not part of the conflict or tensions, they might staying low, lying low. So it depends on different topics, depend on different countries and so on and so forth. But it's a good thing, but at the same time, it's a challenging for ASEAN as a collective solidarity among the countries in the region. So my take, I think I'm not optimistic, but at the same time, I'm not pessimistic, maybe pessimistic. So I would take a pessimistic view about ASEAN, that I would say that ASEAN is important, indispensable, but sometimes we need to recognize that ASEAN is not perfect. it's imperfect, it's sometimes irrelevant, sometimes it's create a kind of contested issues as well. Okay, so in other words, this is what I would try to take to share with you. So undoubtedly, ASEAN centrality is in difficult time amid the strong wind of geopolitical struggle right now. Through the pessimistic perspective, I would like to argue that neither staying strong nor lying low is viable or sustainable option for ASEAN in the future. Because at some point, if you think about 3 M's, meddling, muddling through, and middling, I think what we are trying to do in ASEAN, maybe we might not pursue a kind of meddling or muddling through, but middling. Okay, so that would be my take. So ASEAN has played a good and constructive role in non-traditional security, but it is not quite successful on managing hard security, most notably the South China Sea and Myanmar crisis. I think this is partly because of 3 things that we'd like to talk about. One, I think we might need to think about the concept formation of ASEAN itself, that we have 2 narratives of ASEAN. On the one hand, ASEAN way, and on the other hand, ASEAN centrality. Sometimes they are competing and contrasting with each other. That's the first point. The second one, I think I would try to explore why ASEAN centrality is highly tested and contested. I think this is largely due to the multiplicities of ASEAN identities and its difficult and diverging models of management, peace management in the region. At least we can see that 3 models of these like unity amid diversity, diversity without unity, and diversity with disinterest. And lastly, I would like to call for a new narrative for ASEAN as part of the broader theme of the conference, navigating narrative, which I think I would like to call for ASEAN middle way as part of the middling strategies. So in other words, ASEAN might need to think about to reposition itself as a middle power, as a collective grouping, as a middle power, so as to successfully and sustainably navigate geopolitical competition. So let's start with the first part, okay, about how to problematize the ASEAN discourses. Turning 27 years old now this year, a middle-aged ASEAN has reached a midlife crisis. Why ASEAN partially successful and partially failing? I think this is largely due to the irreconcilability of ASEAN norms and ordering principles, or different narratives, if you like, about ASEAN. 2 need to be highlighted: the ASEAN way and ASEAN centrality. These discursive practices are challenged from within and without throughout many decades of ASEAN regionalisms. Let's start from the internal challenge first, and then we talk about international challenge. In scholarship, we tend to focus on the internal challenges, like internal divide, a lack of consensus within our ASEAN community. But on the other hand, I think we have seen that ASEAN centrality is also undermined and bypassed by great powers as well, through, in particular, during the time of geopolitical, geoeconomic competition, the rise of many minilateral groupings and other block building activities also have undermined ASEAN centrality. First thing first, ASEAN has an ASEAN way discourse or narrative that is, if not the DNA of ASEAN. First of all, ASEAN way largely focuses on institutional non-binding mechanisms such as consultation, consensus building, and informality. Informal diplomacy play important role in ASEAN way, which I think is about largely, as Professor DAV mentioned before, which is very, very accurate, that it is about managing of political views and so on and so forth, rather than a kind of legally binding dynamisms. So in other words, ASEAN, unlike European Union, is a pluralist international society rather than solidarist or supranational governance. The resilience of a pluralist international society is complicated by regional divide. Despite its oversimplified picture, the bifurcation of mainland and maritime Southeast Asia is quite obvious on various fronts. So in other words, being forced to choose sides does not stop or decrease ASEAN member states to take side in a Sino-US competition. I think another note is that in contrast to conventional wisdom on hedging as omnipresent state behaviors in Southeast Asia, it can be argued that sometimes hedging is an exception rather than a rule. Even worse, some countries might be hedging by default. That is, different domestic players and bureaucracies strive to play great power off against one another for maximized maneuverability rather than having a whole of the government approach. Internationally, ASEAN has ASEAN centrality narrative. What is ASEAN centrality? I think it means ASEAN roles and position as a center of multi-layers and multi-prongs region-wide institutional frameworks. ASEAN is seen as at the driver's seat and fulcrum building regional security and economic architecture. However, ASEAN centrality and its institutional cohesion have been increasingly undermined by major powers. Although extra-regional players rhetorically recognize or pay lip service to ASEAN centrality, ASEAN Center institutions have been bypassed by China and US institutional frameworks like multilateral, Quad, AUKUS, and so on and so forth. So in this era of geopolitical competition, ASEAN has become more and more a relevant player. It is internally divided, especially between maritime and mainland Southeast Asia. At the same time, it has been challenged internationally by geopolitical rivalry. Now, ASEAN centrality has been highly contested, I think, due to an elusive identity formation of ASEAN. Okay, sometimes in some cases, like ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific, ASEAN might be diverse but united. In some cases, like South China Sea, I think we have the issues about the diversity without unity. And in the case of others, global challenges of flashpoint, like the Russia-Ukraine war, we might have a diversity with disinterest. So what we need to do, I think ASEAN need to find a new narrative. It is not directly meddling into other domestic affairs, but rather and nor muddling through in the 21st century. What is missing from ASEAN and its centrality is middling. The way that we might need to find a new narrative that transcends ASEAN way in double sense, working with and working against the ASEAN way, in the sense that we would like to develop a more leading from the middle strategies. So what ASEAN really needs is middling in double sense. First, in order to properly manage great power rivalry, ASEAN should regain and revitalize its ASEAN Center institutional frameworks and arrangement. Through what I call discursive balancing, ASEAN should develop a new strategic discourse or narrative to shape a shared and common future. Second, without the middling strategies, ASEAN cannot dissolve or solve internal divide and dissensus. ASEAN way might need to rethought anew. Narratively, it might be termed ASEAN middle way. The key to regional peace and prosperity is for ASEAN to stay in the middle and lead from the middle in the 21st century great power politics. I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Jetipat, for outlining how ASEAN centrality is, as you put it so correctly, tested and contested. and also offering a way in which ASEAN can manage and navigate its way forward in ASEAN Middle Way. And now we have the great honor of hearing Ambassador Saya Khan, the former Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN, and also a Laotian perspective. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Dear distinguished friends and colleagues, dear Dr. Pham, Lan Dung, and all friends, I have been approached whether I could come to Vietnam to present my views on this important issue. I accepted it because I have spent more than 20 years handling ASEAN affairs. Starting when I studied in Australia, I did my master's degree in ASEAN enlargement. So I really appreciate Dr. Pham, Lan Dung for your kind invitation. I think after going through many articles and interviews, publication, and also many other, I listened to others, I feel that there are many differences and common views. Today, through my own experience, after 20 years in ASEAN, I like to come up with my own analysis to share with you. Actually, I really think that look at ASEAN centrality. We should go to five W's that I put it up, 5 W's. The first W is when you take this matter up. When do you take this matter up? The second W is where you are from. The third W is that what kind of geopolitical environment you are in or you have gone through. The fourth W is which one of you believe suits you or your country or ASEAN. And the last one, whom or to whom ASEAN centrality serves. So these 5 W for us, I think it sufficed for me to spend about 10 minutes. I think I can spend much more time than 10 minutes to share with you on these 5 W. The first thing that I like to share with you is that the first W, it's about when you take this matter up. Actually, ASEAN has gone through 2 stages. The first one, when it was formed, and there were only 5 countries, and then Brunei joined. And the last stage, the second stage, is when newer states joined. Vietnam first, and then Laos, Myanmar, and Cambodia, the last one. So it's very important to understand how each stage of ASEAN developed. It's very diverse, very diverse. It is very diverse if compared to the European Union, for example. But it's very important to understand that when you look at ASEAN at that particular time, the first stage or the second stage, when there are already very diverse countries, some socialist countries, some are not. Some just like a country like Brunei. My second W is that where you are from. If you are from America, you are from the other country, you may see ASEAN centrality in your own perspective. But for us, the countries, the citizens of Southeast Asia who have gone through and frustrated a lot during the Cold War, we frustrated a lot. For example, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, during Indo-China War, we just have gone through a lot of difficulties. Let alone, I can share with you, there are 3 million tons of bombs dropped over Laos, and only 1/3 of that, only two-thirds of that exploded. 1/3 still exists over there in Laos, and many other in Vietnam. And about 1/3 means about 80 million bombs still scattered around. And because of the heavy flood recently in Laos, it could take more than 300 years to clear all these. So this is very important. That's why I like to say that, where are you from? If you are from other country, from outside of the region, you may not feel really like us who have suffered. The third one is that the next point is about what kind of geopolitical environment you are in. This is very important as well. You have to make sure that you, what kind of geopolitical environment. For example, you just, when I said just now, Laos was under a heavy bomb. I was the first Lao government official who went down to the south of Laos for joint excavation for missing action American. 13 American services disappear on the plane over there. And I got opportunity to go to observe the clearance of the bomb. So all these we understood. I also was interpreter to the former Deputy Prime Minister of Laos when Laos signed the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation on the 23rd of July 1992 in the Philippines. Then the very important phrase say that let bygone be bygone. It means that we like to forget the past. Let's work together for the future. This is very important. The next point is about which one you believe suit you or your country or ASEAN. For ASEAN citizens, as I already mentioned, we really need peace. We need stability. We need cooperation to make sure that we develop further. I have come here to Halong Bay. This is my third time. The first time over 20 years ago, the second time 10 years ago. Now, I have seen so much development, so much different. It means there is a peace, stability here in the region. There is stability, there is the development, there is cooperation. It means that ASEAN has worked well, serving well China, serving well many other countries. It means that we take the lead. We are leaders of our own destination. We determine our own destination. My last point is about which is whom or to whom ASEAN's Central serve. This comes to a very important point that you have to ask. Are we working for ASEAN interests, or are you telling in words that you are supporting ASEAN centrality, but in action it's not that? I have been attending many international meetings. Some experts have been reminded that you talk only, but you never support us in action. This is very important. That's why it's very important to look for sincere expression and action indeed. I like now to conclude by underlining 4 points. 1, ASEAN centrality considered highly important for ensuring peace, stability, cooperation, prosperity in Southeast Asia region, and it acts as a very important principle, serving as mechanism for dialogue among ASEAN member states and its dialogue partners, and between dialogue partners and themselves. It is the best platform for building regional architecture in Asia Pacific. The principle covers all pillars of ASEAN community political, economic, and culture. The second point is that despite sometimes treated dismissively, and many challenges along the road, ASEAN has made progress and achievement. ASEAN should therefore continue to creatively and constructively use ASEAN centrality in response to specific regional and geopolitical environment. Third point, ASEAN highly appreciates external powers, partners, and friends for their sincere support to ASEAN centrality. The fourth point, the deeper understanding of the 5W certainly will help ASEAN to keep its centrality at difficult time and continue to staying strong and not lying low. With this note, Mr. Moderator, I wish the conference a great success, and I also wish all of you very good health. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for the benefit of your 3 decades of experience. The 5 Ws provide an excellent endpoint to our discussion as a panel to pull threads together so that we can be masters of our own destiny as we move forward. And now it's my privilege to open the floor to questions. Those who are asking questions, if you have a specific question to a particular panelist or the whole panel, please say so. I'll take 2 or 3 questions and put it to the panel. The floor is open. Yes. Gentlemen.
Hello? Okay, it's working. Hello, everybody. I'm Professor Sims from the Young Leaders Program. So I have a question that it might sound a bit weird, but please listen till the end. And I believe that this question might be quite relevant for all the foreigners here, such as me. And the question is quite simple. Like, how do you guys see the region without really ASEAN, or like with ASEAN, but with a diminished role? We've been listening about ASEAN centrality, quite relevant, yes, but I think that it might be useful for all of us, especially foreigners, again, to really listen. What do you guys think would the region look like in the case in which ASEAN didn't really have this fundamental role? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Basically, you're asking the panel, how would they see a region without an ASEAN to bring us all together? Thank you. Is there another question from the floor? Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I see this panel section is very special because all the panelists are ASEAN and moderator also ASEAN. Now my questions to my good friend from Laos, Ambassador Sayakin. Would you please elaborate a little bit further? What does it mean, ASEAN centrality on the issue of South China Sea? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe a third question, Ambassador.
Thank you, Ambassador. In 2016, the tense development in and around Scarborough had given rise to the confrontation between China, the Philippines, and the United States. But then the delicate and constructive intervention of the leaders helped to calm down the situation. Now, the current situation in the South China Sea is getting complicated. And to maintain the ASEAN role of centrality, what kind of measures the ASEAN should take to slow down their ongoing heating up situation and to avoid a potential explosive situation in our region? That's the question to the own panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll turn to the panel because we have basically 2 broad questions. Firstly, to do with ASEAN centrality, and essentially how do how would we preserve ASEAN centrality with regard to South China Sea issues, which I'll put to the whole panel. And the second question is, how do we see do you see a region without an ASEAN? Is that even possible? Do you see a region without ASEAN? So basically, what is ASEAN's role in the region? Ambassador Saikan, please, you can start, and then I'll pass over to the other panelists.
I hope I won't steal the show. I'd like to reply to my friend from Vietnam first. Having been sitting behind the leaders, being myself some leaders, one of the some leaders, I was also Deputy Secretary General handling political security. When talking about South China Sea, in ASEAN, we are aware that there are many matters in Southeast Asia. We have not allowed the matters to bog down to really to hold up our cooperation. Because in ASEAN, we have 3 pillars. We have many areas of cooperation. We have to move on. ASEAN Way is taking part on that. For example, we try to encourage more dialogue. We work behind the scene. We use retreat. We also try to make sure that we encourage track 2, track 1.5 to work. For example, in the 90s, Professor Hashim Salan used to host with Canada the managing potential conflict in the South China Sea, which I also participated some of them. This is also we encourage. Vietnam is now doing the same or similar exercise to make sure that there is contribution. And one other point is that ASEAN is trying to make sure that we identify areas of possible cooperation rather than looking at the very strictly to security, to make sure that the strategic line has to be divided, but to make sure that there is certain area of cooperation. So this is what ASEAN have been doing in the past decade or so. The second point is about do you see a region without an ASEAN? I don't think so. Actually, when I did my thesis about ASEAN in Australia, I tried to understand why ASEAN was formed. It started Murphy Lindo, Sito, whoever, and it did not work. It did not work out because it did not serve really the interests of Southeast Asia. And Professor David Fortuna already mentioned some point already that in ASEAN, ASEAN leaders were able to sit down and try to figure out what have been really the challenge for Southeast Asia. We have to overcome those challenges. For example, in the early 70s, in ASEAN, Southeast Asia, already the Indochina was about to conclude, to end. ASEAN and the 3 Indochina countries have already expressed a kind of rapprochement with all the ASEAN member states to make sure that we take advantage of the geopolitical change during that time. And ASEAN also understand that there are some major countries, some smaller countries, like Brunei, Singapore, smaller in size. Many countries feel that being part of a regional organization is much better than being alone, isolated. So you have to make sure that regional organization help protect your profile, your national interest, even your regional interest. You can embrace all of that. That is why if you ask Laos, Cambodia, or Singapore to ask, Is it possible to leave ASEAN? I don't think so. We must make use of regional cooperation, regional organization, because it's important to project our profile to make sure that our region can play more important role globally.
Before I pose to the rest of the panel the two questions, I will add on a third dimension that came in online. Under what circumstances should ASEAN pursue a more proactive or cautious position on regional security matters? I think we had some discussion that ASEAN centrality also is contextual, depending on the circumstances, and perhaps the three panelists can take this question, starting with Professor Jitipat.
Okay, thank for all questions. I think first, this whether ASEAN should pursue a more proactive or cautious position towards regional security matters. I think ASEAN should take more active role on hard security, right? Issues that are serious to regional dynamisms, security dynamisms. But also they should take some cautious position with global issues that ASEAN are not part of the conflicts per se. So they might take a cautious approach. So in a way, staying strong in some areas and lying low in some area, but above all else, I think ASEAN should take another step that we might need to stay in the middle, try to find a kind of what is our strength that share more consensus. I think that's what ASEAN is good at, to work together with each other. Go to the question about the counterfactual question about region without ASEAN. For me at least, I think it's quite unimaginable without ASEAN. ASEAN, I think, is important and indispensable actor, despite so many imperfect, irrelevant sometimes. But I think without ASEAN, it will create one. I think it will, create a kind of disunited region, which create a kind of more lack of cooperation. Okay. Two, I think it's looking from institutional framework. It might have a little leverage or bargaining leverage vis-a-vis other players in the world, in particular the major powers. Third, I think it might create a kind of region that are more exclusive rather than inclusive regional platform or place to work together with. And fourth, without ASEAN, it might create a kind of it might increase the transaction cost for other countries to deal with each other one by one, one-on-one, and so on and so forth. So that's my take. With regard to the question of what mechanisms that would help slow down or tone down the conflicts such as the South China Sea, and how to preserve ASEAN centrality, I think we might need to think about a circle of three factors. One might be about top-down approach. The second one is bottom-up approach, and the third one is middle approach. The top-down approach might include number one, discursive balancing, how ASEAN should find or navigate a new narrative for itself, or at least to make the old narrative work properly. I think in our time, in our era of muddling through and geopolitical competition, the old narrative seemed not to be working enough or sustainably. So we might need to come up with a new narrative so that we can make sense of the changing world and how to come up with a mechanism and solution. Just give you one brief example. I think the world order is shift from globalization to another G, geopolitics, geoeconomics. So right now, I think many countries are working with globalization, right? With globalization, but the world order is moving in a geopolitical rivalry. So I'm not quite sure that we are ready or we are capable enough to deal with the changing geopolitical competition. The second one, I think we need to step up the institutional balancing. Okay, strengthen, revitalize the ASEAN centrality more. But how to do that? I think at least we might need to do 3 Ds. one, de-geopoliticize, and two, discursive balancing, and three, diversifying. I think ASEAN nowadays might not be a kind of pursuing non-alignment in a sense of staying neutrality and so on and so forth, or not taking sides. But maybe we might need to think about multi-alignment instead. So I think that's another one. With regard to the bottom up, I think we look at the outbreak of national disaster in various places, including Vietnam as well. I think the connection network of regional civil society play important role. So that might be another one. Lastly, about the leading from the middle that I call for, I think it will help revitalize ASEAN centrality to do a couple of things that, number one, strategically hedge with great powers, two, buy them within the rule or norm-based order in the region, and third, initiate region-wide political diplomatic innovations and advocacy together. So to be successful, leading from the middle comprise such strategy as collective leadership, institutional and discursive balancing, and three binding strategies.
Thank you. Dr. Hu?
So to help with some explanation, if the organizer can show the third slide from my PowerPoint, if you can draw that up. So as you prepare that, I can continue to answer question. So I think ASEAN centrality in South China Sea is really to be materialized in the form of COC. So why COC is so important? Because the first discussion about how we agree to have a declaration on South China Sea is right after China's occupation of Fiery Cross Reef in 1988. So there was a battle involved between the PLA Navy and the People's Army of Vietnam. So the first agreement to talk about South China Sea emerged in 1992, and that followed by China's occupation of the Mischief Reef, so in 1995 with the Philippines. So this is why you can see that it was because of the conflict that triggered a kind of integrated regional approach as to how we need to proceed with managing the conflict. So there is, I think ASEAN in general also very much conflict avoidance. We don't want to talk about problems. Even when Kim Jong-nam was assassinated in Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia back in 2017, that was the right time to put Korean Peninsula on ASEAN summit agenda. But Malaysia couldn't persuade ASEAN member states to make it an agenda at the ASEAN summits because the assassination happened in February. There is a long process that allow us to talk about it, but we choose not to talk about it. So I think this conflict avoidance behavior is part of the problem. And sorry that the slide is not showing, so I will just give reply the young leaders' question. The region would be having a lot of incidents, accidents, and fighting with each other if there is no ASEAN. ASEAN is very important. It was established in 1967 because we have confrontasi between Indonesia and Malaysia, Ganyang Malaysia. So when Indonesia joke about like, do you know that we can Ganyang you again if you don't like behave? So Malaysia take it quite seriously, and it is not. The previous slide, please. Yes, so you can see the timeline because I thought everyone is a specialist on South China Sea, so I don't have to share the general overview of what happened. So you can see that from the Battle of the Paracel Islands to the occupation of Fiery Cross, all the way to how COC emerged, the DOC especially in the middle. So when DOC was agreed in 2002, so there was a long peace until early 2010. So there was no conflict. We thought that DOC would help to provide a guideline for us to talk about how to manage our behavior at sea. It is so important because our Navy, our Coast Guard, and the user of South China Sea, that include commercial actors, they need to know how to behave, what should they do when they encounter a certain situation within South China Sea. And this is why it is very important to continue to negotiate. And even if it cannot be concluded when Philippines is the chair in 2026, we should try to renew it and not to abandon it completely. So there is also one question that is about PRC ICBM tests affecting ASEAN-China relations or COC negotiation. The short answer is no. So it concerns US greatly, but not Southeast Asia, because the ICBM wouldn't land in South China Sea because the projectile was really being fired, it would be landing somewhere near Australia, which is a big no-no. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Di Castro.
This is working? Okay. This is my take when we talk about ASEAN centrality. It's not always been there. ASEAN centrality, the notion of ASEAN centrality only emerged, of course, after the Cold War ended. And in 1994, ASEAN formed the ASEAN Regional Forum. It was basically beginning that ASEAN would have control over regional security matters because we formed the ASEAN Regional Forum. But of course, you have to take into account when the ASEAN Regional Forum was formed in 1994 in Manila, I was there were only 5 members. It's just easy for ASEAN to come out with consensus, especially after the Mischief Reef incident. Then, of course, the declaration of the Code of Conduct. There were only 5 ASEAN members. It's easier for us. But of course, it became more complicated when, of course, we expanded. Expansion that does not necessarily mean more powerful ASEAN. It basically, in a way, also created a cleavage. You know, and of course, that's a reality. In the European Union, you have a difference, of course, between the original versus the Mediterranean. Of course, the reality we face in ASEAN is that we have continental Southeast Asian countries and we have maritime Southeast Asian countries that might have a different take. But of course, ASEAN centrality became the talk of the town primarily because it's ASEAN that convenes the ASEAN Regional Forum. Great powers basically accept the fact that ASEAN is center, and of course the fact that there is at least cooperation among the great powers at the time. Japan was of course actively involved, the United States had to become here. At that time, of course, we remember in the 1990s when the ASEAN Regional Forum was formed, we could educate China. We could basically transform China as a part of the region. The notion then, many of those in ASEAN saying, this is basically the role of ASEAN. We could integrate China just like other middle powers. Not taking into account China has its own agenda. China is a great power. Looking at it from that time, it's kind of naive for us to think that we could educate China, transform China into the part of this network. Of course, that situation had remained, but of course, this is what I raised in my point. The cooperation among the great powers, of course, is being unraveled by the fact that we are witnessing what I call a systemic change. You have a great power, of course, the United States, that has maintained the balance of power system in the region since, of course, 1945. And of course, we have China that has the second largest economy in the world, has built the largest navy in the world as Coast Guard, and of course is bent on, again, effecting control of the first island. This is a challenge of ASEAN. How can ASEAN survive and possibly thrive in an era, not simply the case you have a South China Sea dispute, the fact that the region is faced by what we call a systemic change. One great power is being challenged by another great power.
Thank you very much. We'll have one last round of questions. Any questions from the floor? The young lady. Ladies first. Please. Can somebody pass the mic over?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Teme Aspe from the Philippines, and I'm a member of the Young Leaders Program. So my question is, first let's contextualize it in the issue of the South China Sea. So we've seen how ineffective the response of ASEAN on the dispute, and it was highly influenced by both internal and external factors. Now, my question is, I want to know the insights or thoughts of our panelists on whether the ASEAN centrality and its approach in resolving the disputes is caused by the level of economic dependence of ASEAN members to China, considering that China has been a trading partner of more or less 5 ASEAN members. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Just to summarize, whether ASEAN centrality is affected by certain economic realities of dependence, is that correct? Excellency, sorry.
I'm Ambassador Sujan Chinoy, Director General of the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis in New Delhi. My question is two-part. The first is that does any member of the panel believe that ASEAN centrality is actually a double-edged sword? It has permitted external manipulation of ASEAN, the fracturing of consensus, such that when you negotiate, for example, the draft COC, you are actually dealing between the ASEAN and China. But what you decide there, the outcomes are going to affect the rest of us. Because what you decide for the South China Sea is really for, also international waters and sea lines of communication, and this whole business about mare liberum and mare clausum. So what do you think? And the second part is specifically to Professor Renato Cruz de Castro. You seem to suggest that the Philippines has a greater issue and that the ASEAN might be able to play the role of an honest broker, but for the major issues that the Philippines is currently facing vis-a-vis China. But has it occurred to anyone that you cannot be an honest broker if you are at the receiving end? And it's not just the Philippines, but many others in ASEAN who are also at the receiving end in terms of erosion of their sovereign claims. So how do you think you can play the role of an honest broker? You need somebody from the outside.
Thank you. Final question. Final question, please.
Thank you, sir. Jane Chan, RSIS Singapore. We have 4 very senior Southeast Asian representatives, 5, including Ambassador Jaya here. So if I can ask the panelists for your take for there not to have a consensus statement of the recently concluded EAS summit. Is that, in your view, a defeat to ASEAN, or is that actually a victory? A concrete example of ASEAN staying strong and for not backing down to dialogue partners. Thank you.
So basically, the question is on the no EAS summit statement. Maybe I will start with Professor Renato.
That's the point I raised. ASEAN's goal is basically to effect that role of honest broker based on the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. But of course, this is a point I raised in my presentation. The fact that the Philippines has made a decision that we won't be neutral because we have a treaty commitment with the United States. We are not only faced by an expansionist China in the South China Sea, but also we're faced by the China, if China would basically effect its invasion of Taiwan, we would be drawn in. And it's a matter of our national interest. So this is, in fact, I raised the nuance, the challenge that ASEAN faces. The fact that one ASEAN member state, that happened to be my country, is making a decision that might go against the very grain of what ASEAN stands for at this point in time. To remain neutral, to maintain, it is of course a fence-setting stand at the time that you have a systemic change happening. One great power basically trying to push the what we call the strategic offshore balancer in the region since 1945 out of the region. China's goal is not simply the South China Sea. China's goal is basically dominate the first waters of the first island chain. And that's from a perspective of China. We have the second largest economy in the world. We have the largest navy. I still remember a conference where we had in Singapore, and we have a Chinese, former colonel said, China now has the largest navy in the world. So you can notice this degree of sense that, we have the power to basically change the regional balance of power. That's a reality that ASEAN faces at this point in time. Unless, of course, ASEAN recognizes this, there's, of course, a danger that ASEAN, would really faces a major stress in the in this decade of the 21st century.
Thank you. Dr. Hu, perhaps you can address the three questions. Firstly, the no EAS statement. Secondly, the extent to which ASEAN centrality is affected by a degree of economic dependence. And the final question is whether ASEAN centrality itself is a double-edged sword.
Thank you. So I think firstly, I don't know what's going on inside the negotiation for the releasing or not releasing a summit statement, but we need to hear from among the diplomats because negotiation involved is that. So previously, when there is a no statement from a joint statement of ASEAN summit and whatever, it's often because we are being we are divided on some issues, critical issues especially, and sometimes we are being lectured by the major powers who attended the meetings. So I'm not sure which reason is for this round, but I think I will just leave it at that. So I think in terms of ASEAN centrality and how they are actually being recognized by other powers like US, South Korea, Europe, and India. So this is where we need to refer back to ASEAN Charter, Article number 1, and you can Google and just look at it. So the last point under the Article 1 is to maintain the centrality, and that ASEAN needs to play a proactive role, and the regional architecture should be open, transparent, and inclusive. So I think that really sums up why ASEAN centrality will remain relevant and important. And of course, on economic dependency on China, so I don't think we should treat this issue as a binary either-or situation. Of course, we can continue to trade. This is not a war situation. No war has been declared. So of course, we still trade with one another. But in terms of the dependency issues, many countries around the world, having China as a top trade partner, has increasingly tried to diversify their trade patterns and whatnot. So I think this should also give a signal to China that they need to rethink about the strategy of how they want to manage, especially Southeast Asia is considered one of the closest region as part of China's neighborhood diplomacy strategy. So a friendlier region brings more stability and prosperity that's tested and true, and this is why Southeast Asia is one of the most robust region at the world stage, and I think we should continue to pursue it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Stuart.
Okay, I think I will address the question online. What are your suggestions for countries like US, South Korea, Europe, and even India to work within ASEAN centrality, particularly when they have all recognized ASEAN centrality in their official documents? I think my take would be four points. The first point is that I think the power of words matters. So in other words, I think it's a good starting point that all TSE partners recognize ASEAN centrality. I think it's very crucial. But it's a first stepping stone, but it's not enough. The second criteria, I think, is the doer. I mean, the power of the leadership. I think if we look at the fact checking about the leaders' attendance to ASEAN, center meetings like EAS or ARF and so on and so forth. So you see some countries skip more than attending. So I think that might be another step for the country. And it's not only the appearance or attendance, but also a kind of a critical participation, working with working with ASEAN, addressing regional issues with and within ASEAN existing institutions, rather than creating your own institutional frameworks. So in other words, I think what we see now is major powers are trying to bypass ASEAN in the sense that they create their own rule of the game, bypass or in parallel of ASEAN centrality. The third one, beside the doer, we need the power of the deeds, okay? The action, the power of action play louder than the power of words. You can see the concrete collaboration. Look at, for example, Japan has developed a kind of proactive role in the region, and the image of Japan has been image and practices of Japan has been recognized, widely recognized throughout the region. And I think more South Korea, Australia, and India to a certain extent. And lastly, I think all external players, including ASEAN also, need to think about the optic issue as well, about visuality, how to present ASEAN centrality in a new way. So I think that's for my takes on that issues. With regard to No-Yes statement, I think I agree with Shipping on that point. We might need to look into detail. The second point, I think it depends on the context, okay? If it's represent a kind of strong voices from ASEAN countries, I think it might be something that ASEAN have a stance to defend or to say about the lack of consensus. What I'm trying to say is that sometimes consensus matter, but in some case, the dissensus or a lack of consensus can showcase ASEAN's strong position as well. So I think we need to look at case-by-case basis in order to examine the ASEAN centrality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Sayakad, you have the floor.
In the question here, there are 4 countries, US, South China, South Korea, Europe, and even India to approach ASEAN. I think in ASEAN we welcome all, not only the 4 countries to work with us, because the fact that we came up with the outward looking, that was the beginning of ASEAN, how to see the world. And then it came to be centrality. Now, we warmly welcome any intention to work closely with ASEAN in order that we can bring more benefits, not only with the 3 countries and regional organizations like Europe. So we are ready to work with them. Of course, I'd like to point out three areas here. ASEAN is mature enough now to be able to balance interests between their own interests and our external partner interests. That's number 1. Number 2, we have to make sure that our message to our dialogue partners is getting through. That 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and now we are different. You are different. I attended a meeting in Singapore, for example. My friend from Indonesia reminded US delegation that we cannot treat you like 30 years before, because now we have to treat equally with China. We work with China, we embrace, it's our own interest. We cannot send you as VVIP anymore. That's how the message in Singapore was sent to America. That is why we have to ask them to understand us. And they must understand our situation, that we cannot treat them individually differently from the rest, because we want to embrace all. My last point is that ASEAN is in a much better position, mature enough to consider each individual dialogue partner's intention. As I said earlier on, we sincerely express our thanks for the intention to support our ASEAN centrality. But along the road, we study. We understand, 10 ASEAN member states understand along the road for that. That is why I'm very optimistic about ASEAN future. And I'm also very optimistic how ASEAN can nurture, can navigate their interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. On that extremely good note, positive note, and forward-looking note, we will end this session. I want to thank all the panelists here for excellent discussion, and thank you for the excellent question. Thank you all very much. No, it's retired.